Welcome to Wichita Liberty TV with Bob Weeks.
Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news, analysis, and commentary about Wichita and Kansas government and politics. We're broadcast on KGPT channel 26.1, also its companion website, kgpt26.com. Some of you may know me from my blog, The Voice for Liberty, at wichitaliberty.org. The motto there is individual liberty, limited government, and free markets in Wichita and Kansas. I cover things that may not be covered by the Wichita Eagle or other TV or radio stations, or if we do cover the same news, I'll do it from the perspective of economic freedom, limited government, and individual liberty, because these are the things that are important, and these are the things that are so often under attack by our government, be it at the federal, state, or local level. So please visit wichitaliberty.org on the internet. You can subscribe to the email newsletter I send 2 or 3 times a week. And if you'd like to contact me, you can find my email address and telephone number there, or just remember bob.weeks@gmail.com. Well, now, before we get into today's topics, just a little bit of follow-up from last week when we talked about term limits. And I saw a television news story today that said there may be a shortage of clowns in the future as existing clowns get older and retire. And I thought, term limits for our legislatures could help with that problem. But on to today's topic. Open and transparent government is important, and open records laws allow citizens to ask government agencies for records. And while these laws are very valuable, we find that in practice, governmental agencies find many ways to avoid filling records requests. And because the City of Wichita does not live up to the standards of open government, even though it proclaims its support for government transparency, citizens have to work to get this law changed. Locally, the City of Wichita is proud to be an open and transparent governmental agency, its officials say. Wichita Mayor Carl Brewer often speaks in favor of government transparency. For example, in the State of the City address a few years ago, he listed this as an important goal for the city. And we must provide transparency in all that we do, he said. And when the city received an award for transparency last year, a city news release quoted Wichita City Manager Robert Layton as saying, "The City Council has stressed the importance of transparency for this organization. We're honored to receive this award, and we will continue to empower and engage citizens by providing information necessary to keep them informed on the actions their government is taking on their behalf." But contrary to what the mayor and city manager say, when we look at some specific areas of government transparency, we find that the city's efforts are deficient. And that's a problem because citizen watchdogs and journalists need access to records and data. And here's a real big problem. The City of Wichita has created several not-for-profit organizations that are controlled by the city and largely funded by tax money. The 3 I am concerned with are the Go Wichita Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Wichita Downtown Development Corporation, and the Greater Wichita Economic Development Coalition. Now, I have asked each organization for checkbook-level spending data, and each has refused to comply, using the reasoning that they are not public agencies as defined in the Kansas Open Records Act. But consider the Downtown Development Corporation. At the time I made my records request a few years ago, its percent of revenue derived from taxes was well over 90% in all years but one. And in many years, the only income WDD received was from taxes and a small amount of interest earned on past tax revenues. Well, the Wichita City Attorney backs these organizations and their interpretation of the law that they are not public agencies, and so do almost all City Council members. And after 14 months investigating this matter at my request, the Sedgwick County District Attorney agreed with the city's position. This is a problem. There's a lot of taxpayer money being spent without taxpayers being able to see the spending records. This is contrary to the mayor's and manager's proclamations of government transparency. It's also contrary to the preamble of the Kansas Open Records Act, which states, "It is declared to be the public policy of the state that public records shall be opened for inspection by any person unless otherwise provided by this act, and this act shall be liberally construed and applied to promote such policy." But the City of Wichita and the Sedgwick County District Attorney use a narrow interpretation of this law, a tortured interpretation of the law, I would say, in order to block citizen access to records. So what is the next step? Well, the Kansas Attorney General, Derek Schmidt, his office is of no help in this matter. His office refers all cases to the local district attorney, and as he just told you, that didn't work there. And that's a problem, although there is some talk that the Attorney General may open a small bureau to work with records request problems. Well, one course of action to me as a citizen watchdog is to raise thousands of dollars to fund a lawsuit. The irony of this is that I will find my own tax dollars being used against me as the city and other agencies defend secrecy. Also, city officials are likely to demonize anyone who would do this, saying they are wasting the city's times and resources, and they just don't have any business knowing this information. Well, another course of action is persuading the city and these agencies to release the records. Because while these agencies believe the law does not require them to release the records, the law does not prohibit or restrict them from releasing the records. In other words, they could fulfill these records requests if they wanted to. And that would be in line with what the mayor and city manager say they want for Wichita. Well, I and others have tried that, but persuasion didn't work. The true attitude of the city was expressed eloquently by Wichita Vice Mayor Pete Meitzner last month in a television news story about the inability of citizens to see how their money is being spent by these organizations. Meitzner, the vice mayor, said, "The public doesn't need to know about day-to-day spending." And there can be large amounts of money involved. The City of Wichita may soon add a 2.75% tax to hotel bills as a city tourism fee. These new taxpayer-provided funds, estimated at $2.5 million per year, would be spent by the Go Wichita Convention and Tourism Bureau. And this agency, despite receiving nearly all of its revenue from taxation, maintains that it is not a public agency as defined by the Kansas Open Records Act. It refused to fulfill my records requests. And the Vice Mayor, Pete Meitzner, also told the reporter that these organizations have review boards. Therefore, citizen oversight is not necessary. These boards, however, are usually filled with insiders whose interests may not be aligned with the interests of citizens in the order of promoting good government. The term cronies comes to mind. Well, another course of action is to change the open records law, and that's what I and others are trying to do. This week, a committee of the Kansas House of Representatives will hear testimony on HB 2567, which will expand the definition of public agency. I'll be traveling to Topeka to present testimony in support of this legislation. The current law says this in defining which agencies are subject to the open records law. Public agency means the state or any political or taxing subdivision of the state or any office, officer, agency, or instrumentality thereof, or any other entity receiving or expending and supported in whole or in part by the public funds appropriated by the state or by public funds of any political or taxing subdivision of the state. That seems pretty clear to me, but we found that that doesn't work, so the proposed law contains this additional definition. Further, on and after July 1st, 2014, public agencies shall include any nonprofit organization supported in whole or in part by public funds, which organizations are engaged in economic development, tourism, or general marketing activities for the state or any political or taxing subdivision of any office, officer, agency, or instrumentality thereof. This language, if passed into law, would appear to bring the three problematic Wichita agencies under the Kansas Open Records Act. Now, that doesn't mean that they'll have to turn over all and any records that are asked for, as the Kansas Open Records Act contains many exclusions. But we should be able to get spending data and other records that will help citizens oversee the operation of their government and the spending of tax dollars. Now, it's a little distressing that citizens have to pass new legislation in order to get government to behave well. Citizens have to resort to these measures even though city leaders say they value open and transparent government. But as the saying goes, talk is cheap, and getting the City of Wichita to conform to its proclaimed policy isn't easy or cheap. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. Do you read the letters that are published in your local newspaper? Letters to the editor in your hometown newspaper may have the air of being written by a concerned parent of Kansas school children, but they might not be what they seem. It's fashionable for school spending advocacy groups to bash their critics as mere lackeys of a top-down driven power structure. It is the advocates for school spending, the teachers, the parents, children, school principals. These are the true grassroots efforts, they say. So it might be surprising to learn that Kansas' largest teachers union, that's the Kansas National Education Association, has a plan and a mechanism for distributing its message. It's called the KNEA Media Response Team, and it says it is responsible for promoting KENA and public education in the print and electronic media. The team's webpage holds language like, the KENA Media Response Team builds on existing KNEA media outreach efforts and is a sanctioned KENA board task force. Task force? Well, that sounds like a military organization, not a grassroots advocacy group. And sanctioned sounds like someone had to obtain official permission. And obtaining permission from a central authority, that's not characteristic of grassroots activism. And the page also says, because we're seeking fresh voices, board members, council presidents, and local presidents are not encouraged to apply. And it's a detailed plan. During the first year, there will be only one per media market. To participate, members must attend the initial MRT training or have taken Cindy's message framing session within the last 2 years. And there are predetermined talking points on a secret web page. It says, refer to KNEA member-only web page for basic messages on key education issues or contact KNEA Communications for help with other issues. Use these to write your response. And it's encouraged, although not mandatory, to get pre-approval for the communiques that team members have developed. It says, submit your letter to the editor or guest column to the newspaper via email. Send a copy to Cindy. Initially, members may send their letter to Cindy first before submitting it to a news organization. And if the union leaders have a message they want to promulgate, you may be asked to help. Again, from the webpage, at certain times, you may be asked to write letters promoting KNEA's positive goals for public education instead of responding to what others write. And there's a contract that team members must agree to. It says, I agree to become a KNEA Media Response Team writer. I understand and support the goals and guidelines of the KNEA Media Response Team. I will work with KNEA Communications to write letters to the editor and engage in other media activity that helps promote public education. Now, all this would be less than objectionable if the Kansas National Education Association was truly working for the good of Kansas school children. But notice that KNEA is concerned with public education only, not education in general. That's because teachers in private schools, religious schools, and homeschooling parents, well, they're not union members. And we've also seen on Wichita Liberty TV in the past some of the problems with Kansas schools. The Kansas government school establishment, of which the teachers union is an important cog, cites the high performance of Kansas schools compared to other states. But as we've seen in past episodes, this ranking is a statistical anomaly. It disappears when a proper examination is performed. And also we've seen that Kansas has low standards compared to other states. And worse than that, after the last school finance lawsuit, when the state was increasing the level of school spending, Kansas weakened its school standards at the same time. That was the conclusion of the National Center for Education Statistics, which is part of the United States Department of Education. We've also seen that the teachers union, along with the rest of the Kansas public school establishment, seeks to understate the true level and nature of spending on schools. And then, when you learn that the teachers union opposes nearly all forms of education reform, especially measures that would bring greater accountability to teachers in schools, the target of the union's concern is obvious. Now, the teachers union, they show photographs of Kansas school children and says its goal is to make public schools great for every child. Those who look beyond the slogans, however, know that the concern of the union is teachers and not children. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. Those of you who watch this television program and read my blog, The Voice for Liberty, at wichitaliberty.org, know that I value facts, logic, and statistical evidence when it comes to understanding government and public policy. That's just the way I am. But not everyone is like me. Arthur C. Brooks is president of the American Enterprise Institute. He's researched and written extensively on what makes people happy and how government helps us be healthy and happy. Let's take a look at his video, which is titled, Don't Eat Your Dog, The Surprising Moral Case for Free Enterprise.
Meet the Smiths. They're a typical family. Mum, Dad, 3 kids. The kids really want a dog. They beg Mum and Dad, who eventually give in and adopt a puppy named Muffin. Turns out, Muffin is a great dog. But one day, she chases a squirrel, gets hit by a car, and goes straight to doggy heaven. The kids are heartbroken, and so are Mum and Dad. Together, they decide that the best thing to do is to cook and eat Muffin for dinner.
If you're like most people, you know that the ending to that story is just wrong. I'm Arthur Brooks, author of The Road to Freedom, and maybe a philosopher could explain why a muffin roast is not really different from a Big Mac, but you know it's immoral to eat muffin. And no appeal to logic is going to change your mind. Our debates about economics and policy work more or less the same way. Once we think a policy or a law is immoral or unfair, we're very unlikely to be swayed by logical arguments saying that it's actually okay. And this helps explain why our free enterprise system is on the ropes today. We all know that free enterprise is the best system ever devised for creating material prosperity. We have tons and tons of data to prove this. But in debates, we're always going up against heartbreaking stories of sick grandparents and poor kids who can't make ends meet, while fat cat CEOs spend $1 million to decorate their offices. It's no wonder that so many people think that spreading the wealth around makes us a fairer society. Your data on GDP growth are about as likely to win that argument as you are to convince me to eat my dog. Morality beats materialism, period. We know the moral arguments against free enterprise don't hold water, and that they're leading America to be more and more like Greece, broke and hopeless. Sometimes we all feel helpless because our facts about the future of America seem to fall on deaf ears, while the government just grows and grows. What we need is our own moral argument. If we want to start winning, we need to start making the moral case for free enterprise. And it's actually pretty easy to do. The moral case has 3 key points. First, free enterprise safeguards lasting happiness. Second, it promotes real fairness. And third, it does the most good for the most vulnerable. To start, we have to get clear on what America's founders meant by the pursuit of happiness. Did they mean the pursuit of money? Of course not. Your mom taught you, and a bunch of economists have since shown, that money doesn't buy happiness. What does bring happiness, however, is earned success. Earned success is the belief that you're creating value with your life and value in the lives of other people. You can define it however you like. Starting businesses, saving souls, raising great kids, making beautiful art, whatever. Maybe it involves money or maybe not. You decide. Study after study shows that people who believe they've earned their success, regardless of their income, are the happiest people in America. But people who don't feel successful, who don't feel that they have earned their success, are among the unhappiest people in our country. Note that the earned part of earned success is key. To have a happy life, you have to work and sacrifice for what you have. A lot of research shows that people who sacrifice do much better in life than those who try to get by without effort. My favorite study involves little kids and a bag of marshmallows. Researchers at Stanford University in 1972 took kids into the laboratory and told them that if they could wait 15 minutes before eating a marshmallow, they'd get a second one. About 2/3 of the kids failed. Some gave in immediately, but others were in agony, even banging their little heads on the table to try to keep from eating the marshmallow. The researchers followed up years later to see how their lives were turning out. The kids who had waited for the second marshmallow had an average SAT score 210 points higher than the kids who didn't wait. They also made a lot more money and were less likely to be involved in crime and drugs. Teaching young people to defer their gratification, to earn their success, is clearly in our national interest. But expanding the welfare state is basically just shoving marshmallows into our mouths. Free enterprise is the only system that allows us to pursue our happiness by earning our success. And that's the right thing to do, whether we get rich or not. The second moral element of free enterprise is fairness. Some people and politicians in our country want to convince you that fairness means spreading the wealth around. You agree? Or do you think that real fairness means rewarding merit and hard work? If you came from immigrants, ask yourself this. Why did your ancestors come to this country? Was it to get some sort of fairer system of forced income redistribution? Or was it to be rewarded fairly for their hard work and merit? Most people would agree with your ancestors. They think that true fairness comes from rewarding merit and hard work. Here's how I used to explain that idea when I was still a college professor. My economics students were complaining that it's not fair that the rich have so much more than the poor in America. Fairness was their rationale for income redistribution. So I set up a thought experiment. Halfway through the course, I could see big differences between students who were working and those who weren't. The hard workers got a lot of points on tests. Their less motivated friends, not so much. Let's call it grade inequality. We all knew that the students with the highest point totals were the ones who were working the hardest. They might have been a little bit smarter, they might have known a little bit more about economics, but the real difference was their discipline and their study habits. So I made a little proposal. I suggested that we take 1/4 of the points earned by the top half of the class and pass them over to the lower half. Now everybody in the class thought that that was an idiotic idea, even the students at the bottom, and they understood my broader point. Beyond providing for essential services and a minimum basic safety net, redistributing income just to get more equality isn't fair. It's completely unfair. The third moral promise of the free enterprise system, and arguably its greatest achievement in history, is helping the poor and vulnerable all around the world. Here's something you might not know if you only follow the gloom and doom in the newspapers. Since 1970, the worst poverty in the world, which is to say, the percentage of the population that lives on $1 a day or less, has declined by 80%. 80%! There's been no achievement like that in human history. Billions of people have been lifted out of poverty. It's the most amazing thing that humanity has ever accomplished. So what happened? Was it the incredible success of the United Nations? Was it central planning or the International Monetary Fund or global foreign aid? Of course not. It was globalization. It was free trade. It was entrepreneurship. It was property rights. It was rule of law. In short, it was free enterprise that saved all those people. If we want more prosperity, and not just for us, but for people all over the world who are poor, we have to stand up for the free enterprise system. It's truly the system for good Samaritans. From the debt crisis to healthcare, there's no shortage of pressing public policy problems we have to confront today. Data-driven research needs to guide our reforms, but each of these issues contains a moral core that speaks to who we are as Americans and what we value most: earned success, true fairness, and lifting up the poor and vulnerable. Many people in Washington may no longer embrace the values of free enterprise, but most Americans still do. If we want to change the direction of this country, to take the road to freedom, we have to change the way we speak. We have to articulate what's written on our hearts. We have to see that we're not in an economic battle for the future of America. We're in a moral battle. Are you ready?
The moral case for free enterprise and capitalism. These concepts may seem to be opposites to some people, but it's a mistake to think like that. Earned success. You saw in the video that Arthur Brooks says that this is very important, that people earn their success instead of having it handed to them. And that earned success can take a variety of forms. You often hear conservatives say to laid-off workers that, well, you should just start your own business. Well, entrepreneurship is great, but not everyone has the personality for that. Earned success can mean doing a job well and taking pride in it. This is true even if the job is lowly. And in the video, Brooks also talked about basic fairness. Most people believe a fair society is one in which work, creativity, and honest competition result in financial reward. But instead, what we're moving to at the national level is massive income redistribution, which takes from those who have earned a success and gives it to those who have not. Well, I'm making an assumption that those who have a lot of stuff earned it, but so often we see cronyism instead of basic fairness and earned success. Cronyism means insider dealings, social engineering, favoritism, subsidies, waste, fraud, abuse, and pork barrel spending. We see this in Wichita, where there's a favored group of City Hall cronies who receive overpriced no-bid construction contracts, grants, special tax treatment, and other taxpayer-supplied goodies. They don't earn that. And in a companion article to this video, Brooks talks about surveys that indicate that Americans believe that when people earn their wealth, they should be able to keep it. But if the wealth is unearned, then Americans believe in spreading it around, as does President Obama. Brooks says, this is the defining difference of our time. It's not whether one party is fairer than the other. It's whether or not we believe that Americans have earned what they have. That's why I oppose cronyism, as it means getting stuff without having earned it. And Arthur Brooks also says we need to be concerned for the poor. He parts company from many conservatives who feel there should be no social safety net programs. Brooks believes we should provide a safety net for the truly needy, but he is critical of today's benefits programs, which extend into the middle class, he says. He also warns against the excessive government spending and mounting debt in America. When the crisis comes, as it has in Greece and other countries, it is the poor and needy who will be hurt most. So this is the moral case for free enterprise according to Arthur Brooks. Earned success, basic fairness, and a system that protects the poor and lets them grow. He says we need more politicians, intellectuals, activists, and everyday Americans to stand up for free enterprise, not just because it makes us better off, but because it makes us better. Well, thank you for that, Arthur Brooks, and thank you, the viewers, for watching this episode of Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks.